Lee Harvey Oswald, when he was giving out leaflets supposedly in support of Castro, the Fair Play for Cuba Committee, 544 Camp Street was stamped on the literature. So this is where 544 comes into the case, through Oswald having worked there in the same building where Guy Bannister was operating.
But just to underscore the significance of what you just said, what you're describing is a situation in which ostensibly communist material has stamped on it an address 544 Camp, which is the location of part of the intelligence community in New Orleans, meaning, without a question of a doubt, there's prima facie evidence that Lee Oswald was not a communist at all. He was an agent provocateur. We later found out that on the third floor of Bannister's office, he located a small room and cleaned it out and gave it to Oswald to keep his pamphlets in. But you could see Oswald starting out in the morning and Bannister with his gruff voice and those steel blue eyes saying, "Lee, you're doing a good job. Get some more of those pamphlets out today, son. They like what you're doing in Washington." So he goes out and hands them out like he's a communist, but he's the one that calls the news people to come take the pictures, and he's acting out a role as a communist, but he doesn't know they're really fattening him up to be the turkey for Thanksgiving. He's the scapegoat. They're going to have him murdered by making him look like a communist.
Bannister was once the chief of the FBI office in Chicago. How did he first come to your attention in relationship to the assassination, Guy Bannister?
He first came to my attention, well, before the assassination, when I was district attorney. Chet Morrison, the mayor of New Orleans, said, "We have a man named Bannister. Looks like he might be a good assistant superintendent of police for that vacancy." And I didn't know much about him, but I said, if he's got a good FBI background, he certainly is organized and sounds good to me. But anyway, how did he first come to my attention was when I, after spending some nights with the Warren Commission, when I had put aside the address 544 Camp to check because I saw that Lee Oswald was putting that stamp, with his little rubber stamp on papers. He only did it one day, and they stopped him. They kind of had a heart attack, I'm sure, but when he was putting that on the papers he was handing out to the public. But he didn't know that he was set to be the scapegoat, so he was doing what he thought was natural. But what actually happened was when he was arrested on August 9th and brought to the first district, first thing he did was to ask to speak to an FBI agent, and the FBI agent came over, Agent Quigley, and very promptly Quigley and Oswald were locked in a private conference for some time.
This is Oswald was arrested?
Yeah, he was arrested on 9th August because of a controversy. It was a set-up controversy with other Cubans. In other words, one of those things with another Cuban who at the right time said, Oswald said, "Hit me, Carlos," and Carlos swung at him and hit him, and then Oswald pleaded guilty. That's just to make it look like he was a troublemaker for the communists. It was all set up. And it was it resolved in those particular pamphlets becoming available to the eye, though, and ultimately available to me. So I put them on the side to check, and then a few nights later I came across in the Warren Commission report. I'm surprised nobody else found it first. I found myself reading Colonel Folsom's 201, his personnel file, 201 file of Lee Oswald and the Marines, and he casually mentioned, and here's Lee Oswald's grades in a Ryerson test. And somebody must have kicked him under the table because he said he didn't do too well. He got almost as many right as he got wrong, but I wouldn't get any right in a Ryerson test. With all my years in the military, and I was a major by then, I never took a Ryerson test. I was a private, taking a Ryerson examination. And so I realized then that there were signs of intelligence before I left the house, and intelligence training of Oswald for some mission. And this was not long before, when he took this test, not long before he left for Russia. So obviously, in retrospect, he didn't leave as a communist. He left as a young Marine with an intelligence assignment, because otherwise the Marines wouldn't be teaching him Russian. But I want to see what this sort of place this quote Russian studying Marine was operating out of, and that's what caused me to go down that weekend morning to Lafayette Square and look at 544 Camp Street, where I found, my God, this so-called communist, the lone assassin, the man who's supposed to have murdered John Kennedy, man who was butchered before anybody could ask him too many questions, was an agent provocateur working for the United States government. That address, 544 Camp, was a side entrance to Guy Bannister's office. Around the corner on Lafayette Street was the entrance to Bannister's office. Across the street, where in the post office building, was an office of naval intelligence, and Bannister was naval intelligence in World War II. I knew some of these people. I knew that. And the Secret Service, as a district attorney in New Orleans, I knew where some of the Secret Service was also across the street. Around the corner in Lafayette, just across Lafayette Square around the corner, was the office of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and also on another floor, the office of the Central Intelligence Agency. The lone assassin, this person who'd been described to all Americans and lied by allowed the lies by the federal government to all the world as a communist, was a soldier doing his assignment, a Marine soldier doing what he was taught to do after he was given intelligence training, operating right out of the heart, the very heart of the intelligence community. The reason that the heart is located there so close to the riverfront is that's where all the ships go from New Orleans down to Central America and South America. And a lot of the members of the ship's staff, as you might imagine, are intelligence men, too. Nobody was in that office who was not intelligence, Bannister's office. The time that he began operating, the week, is not specific, but it's known that it was through August that he was handing out the pamphlets. And earlier in the summer, he was working around the corner at the Riley Coffee Company. Well, Mr. Riley, not necessarily involved at all, but apparently the nesting place was made available for some request that the coffee company didn't know the reason for, but request by the intelligence community for this nesting place for Oswald. He was operating out of the Riley Coffee Company. Didn't have that much to do, so he spent most of his time at the Alba garage next door, which happened to be the garage, and it's something else I was aware of. That was a garage for the intelligence community. It didn't even accept civilian automobile. It was filled up with the intelligence community. So that's where he spent the earlier part of the summer, and then when August came, he was handing out the pamphlets as an agent provocateur to look like a communist, so that when Jack Kennedy was murdered by the covert action elements getting ready to kill him for the CIA, so this foreign policy could be changed back to the Cold War policy, he was being trained like a turkey being fattened for Thanksgiving.